John Hinckley Jr., the man who tried to assassinate President Ronald Reagan in 1981, will be freed after 35 years.
District Judge Paul Friedman releasing Hinckley to live with his mother.
John Hinckley wounded 3 others when he tried to kill the president in 1981. A jury found him not guilty by reason of insanity.
But there are conditions. For example, he has to keep the Secret Service notified of his movements. He has to let them know before he goes to any private houses.
A U.S. district judge said Hinckley no longer posed a danger to himself or others.
I think that John Hinckley should not have been freed. I just heard about it.
In the days and months after President Ronald Reagan was shot by John Hinckley Jr., there was something of a casual response from insiders about how close the leader of the free world came to being killed that day. I can recall numerous reports and stories that noted the seriousness of the wounds, but plenty of downplay if the president did indeed come close to dying. Of course, we now know much more of what happened that day and how close we came to having George H.W. Bush rise right then to the position of global power with a simple swearing-in ceremony. It all comes back to life as the would-be assassin, John Hinckley Jr., has been deemed by a judge ready to resume a good part of his personal life outside of prison, where he has spent the bulk of his time in the 35 years since that terrible day. There's a true divide on opinion of Hinckley being allowed to live out his days as technically a free man. Those who cite his obvious mental illness as a reason why he shouldn't be behind bars for the rest of his life, and those who believe that makes no difference. This is a man who tried to change the course of American history with a bullet and should never get even a small taste of freedom. Let's dig into this history and a whole lot more. Welcome back the presidential historian, author of the book Last Act, The Final Years and Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan, Craig Shirley. Craig, always a pleasure, my friend. You have done so much work on Ronald Reagan, your book and your research and so much time spent. I'm just curious personally how this news affects you.
Well, I guess I got to step out of character and not be an historian and just be a rational American, Ed. And I'm outraged that this judge would make such a political decision. Look, for my book, Last Act, I interviewed the head of St. Elizabeth's Psychiatric Unit, Dr. Roger Peel, and we talked about a lot of things, including the fact that he told me that he still considered Hinckley a threat to society. And moreover, as the Secret Service has observed him looking at books when he goes into bookstores of presidential assassins, looking for his own name. So he's still enormously self-absorbed. His team of psychiatrists said he was the most self-absorbed, most egocentric client they ever had. Totally without remorse, didn't feel anybody else's pain. So why would you release him now if he is a threat to society and he's not cured? It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Devil's advocate, then. There are those, including the judge, who say, and I quote from the Washington Post, he no longer poses a danger to himself or others, and that's the reasoning behind all this. And there are those who believe that, well, all right, incarceration, prison, psychiatric facility, hospital, whatever it is, you're supposed to do it for rehabilitation in some cases. Again, devil's advocate, and those saying that after all these years, the mentally ill should not be held behind bars or incarcerated.
Well, look, let's face it, Ed, is that the jury trial was a charade, it was a farce. It was 12 African Americans in D.C. who bought into the expensive liberal lawyer argument that Hinckley was innocent by reason of insanity, which created new jurisprudence that never before in the history of the American Republic had somebody been adjudicated to be innocent by reason of insanity. Greg Craig was John Hinckley's principal attorney, he was also an attorney for Ted Kennedy, also an attorney for Bill Clinton, also an attorney for Barack Obama. And so who's to say that there isn't a vast left-wing conspiracy that exists in America today? This was a political decision to find him not guilty, and it was a political decision by the judge to release him.
Greg, remind everybody, if you will, those 35 years, it takes a while sometimes, and a lot of people are not aware, how close we actually came to having Ronald Reagan die.
Reagan, if Jerry Parr, his Secret Service agent, orders the limousine to the White House instead of to George Washington Hospital, Reagan would have died. He lost half the blood in his body. One lung was collapsed. He almost went into shock as he was in the hospital. He came extremely, look, the devastator bullet, it was burning in his chest, 1 inch from his heart, And praise be to God that the devastator bullet didn't do what it was designed to do, which was explode upon contact, because then we would have had a dead president. The bullet that hit James Brady did explode tragically in his head, which, by the way, we haven't even gotten to the subject of James Brady, who was ruled, when he died, it was via homicide. Why hasn't Hinckley been charged with murder like that? Or Tim McCarthy or Joseph Delahunty, the D.C. police officer, and the Secret Service agent, both shot by Hinckley. This is a travesty of justice. Sirhan is still in jail, but Ronald Reagan's attempted assassin and the murderer of James Brady is out walking free today, and that is just liberal, corrupt justice.
It may have taken a long time, but indeed, James Brady did die of his injuries that he suffered that day when the president was shot.
Yes, and it was ruled that he died because of those injuries.
And he still is not, as far as justice is concerned, a murder victim. People who were there certainly know differently. Let's talk about history of a different kind. History was indeed made last night, and Hillary Clinton had this message for the crowd in Philadelphia.
We just put the biggest crack in that glass ceiling yet. This is really your victory. This is really your night. And if there are any little girls out there who stayed up late to watch, let me just say, I may become the first woman president, but one of you is next. Thank you all. I can't wait to join you in Philadelphia.
All right, Craig, a whole lot of applause, a whole lot of wonderment there. Everybody is happy, but hold on a minute. Donald Trump's numbers have peaked since the RNC convention. Matter of fact, they are still peaking. In some instances, he is up by 7 points. In the LA Times USC poll, on average, he's up by 1 point. We got a long way to go here, but still, Craig, Hillary Clinton can say all she wants. She can talk about little girls becoming the next president, but are we not still at the point where people don't like her? She has no likability. Her likability is terrible at this point. Where does she and how does she, in your opinion, now spin now that she is the actual nominee and try to fight that if she can?
Well, it all comes down to her speech. This is her first, not her first introduction to the American people, but it's a kind of her rebranding, and I hate that phrase branding, but I can't think of a better one at this point. And so she's going to have to reintroduce herself to the American people and get them to think of her in a different stead. They're trying to introduce her as, or reintroduce her as a agent of change. Whether or not that's going to help, I don't know, because obviously change is in the atmosphere right now, and Donald Trump is running as the candidate of change. Her saving grace is that Donald Trump is even more unpopular than she is. So it remains to be seen. This is going to be a knockdown, drag out. I suspect it's going to be a very close election. Proof that both candidates are enormously disliked. Both are going to run personality campaigns. So at the end, it's going to remain to be seen who runs the better personality campaign and anti-personality campaign against the opponent right now. The Electoral College does favor Hillary. There's no doubt about it. But Trump is making inroads in certain states like Ohio and Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So it's going to be fascinating. It's not going to be high, uplifting oratory and debate, that's for sure.
Less than 60 seconds in. Let's keep with history. What can Donald Trump learn from history that could then lead him down the path as now the nominee in how to go after somebody like Hillary Clinton?
Well, he's got to realize what this race is about, Ed, is that he's got to stop attacking Ted Cruz and stop attacking John Kasich. He's dividing the party. 1/3 of the delegates to the Cleveland Convention voted against his nomination. So he's already the head of a badly fractured political party, but he's making it even worse by focusing his attention in his rearview mirror instead of looking ahead. He needs to build bridges ahead instead of burning bridges behind him. He needs to start unifying the party. He needs to swallow his pride a little bit and say some nice things about those candidates that didn't show up at the convention, but whose help he still needs.
Oh, you are asking for a lot, young man. I kind of like that.
I like you calling me young man.
Well, sure. Come on. I mean, I think you've called me that once or twice. Well, if you haven't, then you better sooner or later, and you're on notice now.
You bet, youngster.
The book, once again, is Last Act, The Final Years and Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan. It will teach you an awful lot about the man and even get you ready for this election. Craig Shirley, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us. You ain't seen nothing yet. November's a long ways away, and we'll be here for it. Rock on, true believers. Thanks for joining us. Good night and good luck. See you tomorrow.